Our final presentation will be by Chris Keegan, who is the operations engineer for Washington DOT. Chris will provide some insight into the impact on DOT bridge inspections and bridge preservation at Washington DOT.
This is, I'll be talking about Washington State's COVID-19 response. I'm an operations engineer for the Washington State Department of Transportation. And as Tom pointed out, we had patient zero as far as COVID-19. This was a man who had traveled to China when he came back, and they were warning people who had been to China, if they started getting the sniffles and feeling bad, they should go see their doctor. So this man did. He went in, and not sure exactly when, but it was finally diagnosed that he did have COVID-19 by February the 2nd. And we had the first U.S. diagnosed case of COVID was here in Washington. And February, we didn't see a lot of people getting it other than some rest homes and where we started getting fatalities. But by the beginning of testing available, the number of cases skyrocketed. Such that by March 12th, the governor closed all the schools in Washington. And by March 16th, Washington DOT had opened our emergency operations centers. And during this time, it was highly encouraged that any office workers should start working at home, which caused its own problems because our VPN system was not geared up for more than 100 or so people. We started getting hundreds of people and up to thousands. Things just pretty well stopped, and you got frozen screens quite often. And by March 25th, the governor put out his stay home, stay healthy order. At this time, all contract work was shut down except for 9 fish passage projects. These are projects that we are required to have completed by a certain date due to a federal order. And maintenance work was also halted except for essential work. Essential work were things like traffic management center, incident response. We had small crews at each of the sheds to respond. Our bridge crews went home, but were called out if there was any damage, potholes, and so on that you go out and work on. And on May 13th, we had a hiring freeze. We couldn't hire anybody. And this is while everybody was pretty much still at home. Okay, on May 17th, our maintenance crews and our project office personnel were allowed to go back out in the field, but only for low risk work where you keep 6 feet of separation. Workers, however, with underlying conditions or with household members with underlying conditions were allowed to stay and work from home. I had at least one employee, his wife was undergoing chemo, and he was allowed to stay at home. By May 17th, when we had the stay home, stay healthy order, our contractors were required to come up with safety plans and get those approved before they were allowed to go back to work. And the majority of them by May 17th had their approved safety plans and could go back to work. Beginning of June, our maintenance crews could go back to work with things that were not low risk, but they still had to maintain their 6 feet of separation. Also, similar to other states, they had to travel alone. They could not go in trucks together. And luckily, because all of our office workers were staying at home, we had a lot of sedans available for them to use. Now, our work sites looked quite congested as everybody came in a different vehicle. By July, we were also told to take a furlough day, 1 day a week. So that also affected our efficiency. And since then, we were required to take 1 furlough day each month through October. At the same time, usually in the spring, we do hiring, especially for people like our striping crews, pavement markings, and so on. Also, if people have been in for a year as part-time and temporary employees, once that year is up, we had to let them go. We weren't allowed to extend any of those people. So by July, we were down about 20% in our maintenance personnel since the beginning of the pandemic. Now our restrictions basically is work from home if it is all possible. If you're an office worker, you will stay home. In order to come into the workspace, you had to get permission from your boss. And when you went in there, you had to take your temperature, sign in, wear your mask, and so on. When you went out to work, there was no carpooling for anyone. Everybody had to be in a different vehicle. Masks must be worn when you're on the job, except when eating or when traveling alone. At the job site, you must have at least 6 feet of separation. If work requires closer contact, you had to use air-supplied respirators or N95 masks. Every work site was required to have a wash station. Tools and vehicles are cleaned frequently. When the crews come into work, in fact, before they come to work, we have an app that had to be filled out. They had to swear that they did not have any COVID, no fever, no sniffly nose, anything like that. If you had any of those, you had to notify your boss and stay at home. We're saying there was a lot of inefficiency, and this also affected our inspectors. Inspectors also went home, and for 7 weeks without being able to inspect bridges, you can tell that they were going to be far, far behind in the amount of work that they're going to get completed. Okay, can you turn it over to me? I'll see if this works. Anyways, the bridge inspection suffered due to 6 weeks of stay-at-home and furlough delays. For 2020, our inspectors were going to do 1,990 routine fracture critical and underwater inspections. Forecasted right now for 2020 that we will be late for 640 of those. We will not complete 70 of them. And we were allowed, because we were talking to the federal highways, to defer 740 of the inspections. These are bridges that were in good condition, and we are allowed to defer those. But we do expect a finding from federal highways. Now, findings aren't always bad. We had a finding about 6 years ago because on steel trusses, we weren't doing adequate fracture critical inspections because of the amount of dirt on the bridges. So we were required to clean all our steel trusses. And I got $2 million at that point to go and start cleaning our bridges. And we were able to buy 2 under-bridge inspection trucks, snoopers, if you say. And since then, we've been able to stay up on at least on cleaning our steel trusses. As far as bridge maintenance goes, in 2019, we really turned a corner because up until then, we were continually falling behind on the number of bridge repairs we were completing, just because things were falling apart faster than we could get to them. We didn't have enough personnel to do the work. And this allowed us, well, we were able to get $6 million funding increase, and we added 2 more bridge crews, one in the eastern regions and one in our Seattle area. And the number of high priority structural repairs decreased for the first time in a decade. But because of 6 weeks of stay-at-home furloughs and the hiring freeze, repair backlog will increase. We're trying to crunch those numbers and see where we are right now. As far as financial impacts, I'm really surprised some of the states are worse off, because right away we were told to come up with a 15% decrease in the amount of spending we would do. Our gas tax revenue is down. Its forecast will be $806 million short. Right now, our traffic is averaging to be down 16%. Our ferry revenue is down $132 million considered over the next 3 years. Ridership is at 30% of normal. Our toll revenue is down $189 million. Our high occupancy toll lanes, our usage is way down, mainly because the traffic's pretty good. Traffic on the 520 floating bridge, that's Seattle to Bellevue, is down 50%. A lot of the major companies that are in Seattle to Bellevue, things like Amazon, Microsoft, Google, all those, right at the beginning of this, they told everybody stay home and work from there, and they can do that. And so people aren't coming from the Bellevue area where we have a lot of homes into Seattle. They don't need to anymore. At this time, we were also looking at a lost revenue due to an initiative that reduced car tabs to $30. And this was paying for an awful lot of new work. But we found out today that our Supreme Court declared the initiative unconstitutional. So we dodged that bullet, but we're still required to save money. We're still required to maintain our 15% reduction in the amount of spending we do. And we're hoping that will turn around when the legislature comes to town come January. And that's my fairly quick presentation, despite being stuck.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.